Some Pokemon are so rare that the only way to get them is to hatch an egg made from 2 Sneasels, walk through the game's walls all the way to a faraway island, or spin in a circle on top of a specific flower pixel and pull out some Instagram camera filter. I wish I was kidding about that last one, but at least I don't feel so bad about 10-year-old me trying to HM strength a random truck. But a lot of these, what are typically called mythical Pokemon, tend to be really iconic. Living in Japan, I can tell you guys that Mew, for example, is almost as well known even by non-Pokemon fans as mascots like Pikachu and Charizard are. But, and maybe this is just me, but it feels like mythical Pokemon over the years have become increasingly forgettable and irrelevant. Cause I don't know about you guys, but my mythicals just sit in a box in my PC collecting dust. That is, the ones I actually bothered to get. So why exactly do we have this problem with mythical Pokemon? And what could Game Freak do to fix it? Well, as both a competitive player, as well as someone who's just been a genuine fan of the franchise for the last 30 years, I do have a few ideas. And the reason I wanted to make a video on this topic specifically is I think this is something that's actually tightly linked across both the hardcore and more casual Pokemon universe, from VGC players to Nuzlocke enjoyers to shiny hunters. So let's start with the problem. Of which, I think there's 2 main problems at the source for why mythical Pokemon feel so lacking nowadays. And the first is the experience. Mythicals are typically limited time events, sometimes even tying in with whatever Pokemon's latest movie release is for a little cross promotion, which is pretty cool, and it does add to the whole experience. Until all you end up having to do is drive to your local GameStop, download the mythical Pokemon, and then just drive back home. Now, obviously, not all mythicals have been distributed this way, and I'll talk about the ones that actually were unique in a bit. But of all the mythical Pokemon, how many ways of obtaining them have actually been memorable? If anything, some of the ways you could get them through glitches have been the most memorable. But it's time to tie it back to competitive play now with the second big problem. So you've gotten your new mythical Pokemon, and sure, it may have been a very uneventful way of obtaining it, but you're ready to make some lasting memories with it through battles. Wait a second. Mythicals are banned in official tournaments, and they always have been. Normally, Pokemon's a very inclusive franchise and wants all of their creatures to get some spotlight. So no matter whether little Timmy wants to take his favorite Rayquaza into battle, or youngster Joey just wants to have some fun with his favorite Rattata, every Pokemon is allowed to be used at some point. I think there's some fairly obvious solutions that may have already come to mind, but there's some definite criticisms I'll have to address. So let's start with the first easy solution of making mythical Pokemon more memorable. And the reason I say it's easy is because I do think this is something Pokemon has shown some improvement in, especially after the disaster of Zarude. Because the only thing memorable about this Pokemon is that whenever I see its name, my brain can't help but go do-do-do-do-do. Anyway, the Mochi Mayhem DLC mission to get Pekarunt, that had an entire story behind it that finally culminated in being able to catch Scarlet and Violet's lone mythical. And Legends Arceus, which, if the name doesn't give it away, the entire game led up to encountering and capturing Arceus, who was previously one of these event-exclusive Pokemon. So if Game Freak cuts down on the number of new mythicals each generation, and then does for them what they did for Pekarunt this gen, that should help a lot with making future mythicals feel more important. And in all future Legends games, they should definitely continue at least having some interesting and fun side quests that put some story behind obtaining a few of the older mythicals that haven't been widely distributed yet. The second solution to the problem though is the one with a few obstacles, and that's allowing mythical Pokemon in official tournaments. Now, aside from the recent Regulation J announcement, which I'll get to in a bit, we actually have some additional precedent for this. I said earlier how mythicals have never been allowed before in official tournaments. Well, I wasn't being completely honest, because that's a bit of a technicality. You see, back in Sword and Shield, there was a very brief period of time where you could use mythicals in the official competitive rule set. However, there were no in-person regional or international championship level events during this format, so it ended up being mostly just for fun. And it just so happens that the new Regulation J rule set looks like it may very well follow in that same path, never being legal for official in-person tournaments. But there are generally 2 big concerns people have with this suggestion. First is the Fampi in the room, the availability, or lack thereof, of mythical Pokemon. But Pokemon has made a pair of event-only Pokemon legal, and no one seems to talk about it, even when one of them just recently won a regional championship, because Walking Wake and Iron Leaves aren't considered mythicals, despite being more unavailable than a number of actual mythicals. Now, I don't want to hit you guys with a searing hot take here, but you know what? I I happen to be against Pokemon gatekept by a limited time event. Real bold of me, I know, but in case it needs to be said why, just imagine someone who's brand new to competitive Pokemon looking to attend their first official tournaments. And if the events to obtain those Pokemon have already ended, well, they're out of luck. Oh, and that regional Walking Wake one? Well, that's a perfect example, because it wasn't even available to get at the time. So if Pokemon ever decides to make Mythicals legal for official tournaments, no longer can there be any Pokemon where you can't get them, even if you buy every single game in the entire franchise. But if that happens, then I'd love for Mythicals to be allowed, at least at a few official tournaments every couple of years. And let's be honest, it sure beats them reusing old formats like they did this year with Regulation G. But there's one more concern people usually have, and that's the belief that Mythicals would be way too overpowered. I mean, their stats are a lot better than most regular Pokemon, and even higher than a lot of legendaries. Well, maybe this is my actual white hot take, but I don't think Mythicals would be all that overpowered. In fact, I'd go as far as saying a number of them have probably been power crept. But there are a few things we do need to stop and address. First is Arceus and Hoopa Unbound. They obviously have much higher stats than regular Pokemon, and even higher than all the other Mythicals. So if they're ever made legal, they'd need to be classified as restricted Pokemon, meaning they're competing against their own weight class of equally powerful legendaries like Kyogre, Calyrex, and Miraidon. Second is the rule set, because one possible format to allow Mythicals in is what I just alluded to for Arceus and Hoopa, a restricted format, which is the format that's currently ongoing and will be played at this year's World Championship, featuring the strongest Pokemon in the entire game, which, coincidentally, is exactly what Regulation J will be. But Regulation J doesn't just consider Arceus and Hoopa Unbound to be restricted, it considers every Mythical as a restricted Pokemon. And looking at the base stats of every other Mythical, I really can't envision very many of them being remotely good in a Regulation J style of format. I mean, is anyone really gonna use Jirachi, Volcanion, or Pekkarunt instead of the much higher statted Zamazenta, Kyogre, or Lunala? Which kind of ruins the whole point of making a rule set where not only can mythical Pokemon be used, but they can actually be viable too. But what about the formats where the restricted legendaries are banned? Or even a format like we had last year, and we'll have again in less than a month instead of Regulation J, where all legendaries, and even the Paradox Pokemon, are all banned. Wouldn't Mythicals then be way too good? Well, you'll still have a ton of Pokemon that, despite technically having lower stats, are far stronger than most Mythicals, and we'll be able to keep them from destroying the balance of the game. Although, maybe I should reword how I'm saying that, because I don't want it to come across like I'm praising Pokemon like Urshifu and Incineroar as some kind of defender of game balance, because they're not. But there are a few Mythicals that I think would be really interesting and fun to use, and see how players can creatively build teams around them. Especially with Pokemon Champion's upcoming release, bringing back Megas, Z-Moves, and Dynamax. Just to leave you guys with some examples, I think Magearna would be really strong, maybe even the strongest mythical Pokemon, because it has great typing, good bulk, a high special attack, a really unique ability that makes it stronger each time any Pokemon faints, even your own, and a crazy good move pool to back all that up. Diancie gets the Body Press Iron Defense combo that's had a lot of success in the Terastallization era, and even gets a really powerful Mega Evolution as well as an incredibly strong signature move. And speaking of strong signature moves, Marshadow could be a good weapon on Hyper Offense teams, and even has a signature Z move with an almost 200 base power. And Melmetal is another mythical with a broken signature move, and even has its own special Gigantamax form. And there's a lot of other mythicals that could take advantage of Dynamax as well, simply because they learn a flying type move. And speaking of flying types, Shaman would even be unique as an alternative grass type to Rillaboom and Amoonguss, being a fast and offensive option rather than a defensive one. And when it comes to offense, Tail Glow is a terrifying move that, for good reason, no Pokemon learns aside from the weak-ass Volbeat. That is, except Manaphy, who has the bulk, typing, and moves to take advantage of it. But perhaps an even more terrifying move is the Temu version of Urshifu. Baby Hoopa, who's also able to hit through Protect with its signature move. I think a few of the what might seem like weaker mythicals could even be good as well given the right format. But last but not least, Darkrai obviously has an insanely broken move, only balanced by its abysmal accuracy. Though balanced is doing a lot of heavy lifting here. But even if Darkrai wouldn't be broken, which I don't think it would be, it's still fast and strong, turns Amoonguss' Spore into a damaging move, and if Darkrai is on a team that can cheat its accuracy through things like Gravity, or even by another strong mythical with a crazy signature move in Victini, then it could at least give today's player base the same PTSD us boomers felt back when Dark Void Smeargle was a thing. On second thought, maybe it's for the best that mythical Pokemon stay banned.